In 1929, rolled up on a dusty shelf in a library in Constantinople in Turkey, a map was found. This map had been drawn in 1513 by a Turkish admiral, Admiral Piri Reis. The strange thing about this map is it shows features of the Earth that nobody in 1513 should have been able to know.
Before the 18th century, sailors ran the risk of crashing their ships onto rocky coastlines because they lacked one thing, the ability to calculate longitude. For that, you need an extremely accurate clock. It wasn't until 1790 that the first accurate marine timepiece was invented, and sailors could pinpoint their position on the seas.
And as Piri Reis himself told us, that knowledge was not his knowledge. It was knowledge that he'd borrowed and copied from earlier maps. And he stated on the map that it was based on more than 20 source maps, and that some of these maps went back to the time of Alexander the Great, or even earlier, in other words, to before the time of Christ. So the mystery is, where did these source maps come from? Who charted the globe long ages ago with an accuracy that we ourselves can hardly match today? The strange thing about this map is it shows features of the Earth that nobody in 1513, let alone thousands of years previously, should have been able to know. It shows Antarctica, and it shows South America and Africa in perfect relative longitudes. The map incorporates a high degree of geographical and scientific knowledge. According to historians, no map should have been able to incorporate accurate longitudes before the late 18th century. Yet these ancient maps show that it was done. And this is a fact that we're confronted with, whether historians like it or not. And confronted by that fact, we have to make certain deductions from it. And that the clearest deduction of all is that whoever drew up those original source maps thousands of years ago had a level of technology as high as our own. They had explored the whole globe from north to south and from east to west. They knew the exact location of all the continents and land masses. So this is testimony of an advanced and as yet unidentified civilization in remote prehistory.
Here you can see some world maps. On the top, on the right side, you can see the Piri Reis map, which was used already long time before Christopher Columbus came to America. And you can see how perfect this map was already in the beginning of the 16th century, showing part of Europe, of Spain, Portugal, part of Western Africa, and also part of South America. We do not know until now who was able to make such a perfect map already centuries ago, and on the rest of the Piri Reis map, which we do not show on this picture, you can also see the Antarctic without ice. In 1956, researchers found out that the Earth under the ice mass at the Antarctic is exactly like the Piri Reis map was showing. So this Piri Reis map should be at least older than 10 to 12,000 years. But the next question would be, who was able to make such a wonderful world map?
The Piri Reis map definitely shows the northern coastline of Antarctica, of the Antarctic Peninsula, and perhaps the greatest mystery of all is that it shows the Antarctic Peninsula not as it looks today, covered by more than a mile of ice, but as it actually looks underneath that covering of ice. Now, we ourselves have only known what the land under the Antarctic Peninsula really looks like since 1958, when seismic surveys were taken across the ice cap. And the mystery of this map is it shows Antarctica as it looks under the ice long before Antarctica is even supposed to have been discovered. And the Piri Reis map isn't alone. It's one of a category of maps that focus on Antarctica. The famous geographer Mercator in the 16th century provided us with an accurate map of Antarctica 300 years before Antarctica was discovered. And he too said that his information was based on earlier sources. Orontius Phineas provided a map of Antarctica showing mountains along the coast, with rivers running down from those mountains into the sea in places where huge glaciers stand today. And perhaps the most amazing map of all was drawn by Philippe Bouache, a French cartographer in the 18th century, again based on earlier source maps, which gives us an almost perfect rendering of the whole continent of Antarctica as it actually looks underneath the ice. Now in this there lies a great, great mystery.
On the left side down, different sides of a huge stone world map. This stone world map was found in 1984 while gold digging in Ecuador in an underground tunnel system with other 350 artifacts which do not really fit any known and existing South American pre-Columbian culture. On this stone map is a natural quartz line, a white one, and this is the front side of the world stone map, and you can see approximately in the Near East, close to Saudi Arabia, you can see an inlay as an eye. And from this eye to the right and to the left is a natural quartz line going on the right side over India, Thailand, and also there is a long island on the right side, which Professor Kimura's research gave him the statement that from the northeast Japanese island until far down after Taiwan, once there existed a huge continent. But then this world map must be older than at least 10 to 12,000 years.
The implications of these maps are truly enormous. We're faced with one of two propositions. Geologists tell us that Antarctica has been covered with ice for at least 3 million years. This is the orthodox geological opinion. In that case, we're obliged to accept that Antarctica was mapped accurately more than 3 million years ago, when we ourselves, as a species, are not even supposed to have existed on this planet. Alternatively, there's a possibility that the geologists are wrong. They've been wrong before, and it's possible that they're wrong about this. There's a growing body of extremely persuasive evidence which suggests that Antarctica may not have been covered with ice, and certainly not completely covered with ice, until 10 or 12,000 years ago, just a blink of the eye in terms of geological time, and well within the time span of human beings, just like ourselves. Let me tell you a little story that will help to shed light on this. Back in 1916, a geologist called Alfred Wegener proposed what was at the time considered to be an outrageous geological hypothesis. He said that it looked to him like the continents floated around on the surface of the Earth over very long periods of time. It looked like West Africa and the east coast of South America fitted together like a kind of jigsaw puzzle. He proposed the theory of continental drift. Wegener was completely ridiculed by his colleagues in 1916. He was regarded and described as a madman. By 1960, the theory of continental drift was being taught as orthodox geology in all our schools. I tell you this story to illustrate that geology is about theories, and theories change in time. And sometimes what seem like outrageous theories get supported by later evidence. In 1953, another outrageous geological theory was proposed. It was proposed by a man called Charles Hapgood, a professor in America, and he suggested a very intriguing possibility, which is that the entire outer crust of the Earth, you know, we live on an 8,000-mile thick planet, and the crust, the hard crust of the Earth on which we all live, is only 30 miles thick. According to Hapgood's theory, this crust of the Earth can sometimes slip in one piece around the core of the Earth, rather like the loose skin of an orange moving around the fruit at the center of the orange. Now, interestingly enough, Hapgood's theory received an extremely strong endorsement at the time from one of the greatest minds of our century, Albert Einstein, who liked the physics of the theory. And I think if Einstein had lived, that we might have seen the theory of Earth crust displacement much more mainstream today than it actually is. But this theory explains how and why Antarctica could have been ice-free as recently as 12 or 15,000 years ago, quite simply because at that time the Antarctic continent was not positioned dead center within the Antarctic Circle, as it is today, but was positioned further north, about 2,000 miles further north, according to Hapgood's and Einstein's evidence, and that a massive one-piece displacement of the crust of the Earth forced that continent southwards, dead center into the Antarctic Circle, and it was only then that the 2-mile and 1-mile thick ice cover that cover various parts of it today actually began to build up.
And here is the backside, and you can see on the right side coming the quartz line passing in the Atlantic, a continent, Atlantis, which in our days does not exist anymore.
It's just possible that as recently as 12 or 15,000 years ago, Antarctica wasn't covered by ice as it is today. The evidence is mounting to suggest that Antarctica hasn't always been where it is today, that it has been shifted south into the polar latitudes where everything freezes. For example, they found fossilized forests in Antarctica. Now, you cannot grow a forest in a place that has 6 months of darkness a year, which Antarctica presently has. They've even found fossilized palm leaves there. The theory of Earth crust displacement actually explains many mysteries. It explains why there was a last ice age, it explains why the ice suddenly melted, and it explains also a very great mystery indeed, which is why we find literally flash frozen over large areas of northern Siberia and northern Canada enormous quantities of carcasses of mammoths and other large mammals which appear to have been hit by some kind of gigantic cataclysm. The evidence suggests that that cataclysm was a displacement of the crust, which forced some areas of the northern hemisphere south. It was a kind of swiveling, turning of the outer crust of the Earth, and while some parts of the northern hemisphere were shoved south, other parts, which had been in relatively warm latitudes, were shoved north, much closer to the North Pole, and almost literally overnight. This is the only theory that I've come across which can explain these hundreds of thousands of carcasses of basically warm weather animals very close to the North Pole today. A lot of people ask me what I consider to be a very intelligent question about this issue of relative longitudes and the accurate maps that have come down to us from the past. They say, if the crust of the Earth shifted in one piece, as you're arguing, how come these ancient maps are showing us the world as it looks today? Shouldn't they be showing us it as it looked before the crustal displacement? I've gone into this in great depth, and I think there's an answer to this question. What all the evidence suggests very, very strongly is that an attempt was made to remap the planet after the displacement of the crust, so that these maps have come down to us from a time when that tremendous cataclysm of the displacement of the crust was over. I think these maps were done by the survivors of a civilization that was destroyed in the displacement of the crust, and that they sought to create again an accurate picture of the world that they now found themselves living in. All over the world we find traces of what I call the fingerprints of the gods, the echoes, the memories, the monuments left behind by a civilization that has not been identified by historians. But the great problem is that all we find are these faint hints and traces. We find the fingerprints, but we don't find the body. Now, coming down to us from the remote past is a whole category of legends, of which the most famous is the legend of Atlantis, that speaks of a continent on which a great advanced civilization existed long ages ago. The problem with the whole notion of Atlantis, and what's really scuppered it as a workable theory up to now, has been the fact that nowhere around the Earth has anybody been able to find any traces of a lost continent. The idea that it's on the ocean bottoms doesn't work, because the ocean bottoms have all been mapped, and there's no lost continents down there, either in the Atlantic or in the Pacific or anywhere else. Canadian researchers, Rand and Rose Flemath, came up with an answer to this problem, which I personally find very convincing, and which ties in very closely to the theory of Earth crust displacement. Their answer to the problem is very simple. They say that the lost continent of Atlantis is actually Antarctica, and that it's under 2 miles of ice at the South Pole that we are going to find the great engineering works, the harbors, the buildings, the libraries of this lost civilization. That's where we're going to find the body, as it were, instead of just the fingerprints. I think that it's very important that these ideas should be taken seriously. We're operating in the realm of theory here. This is how human knowledge moves forwards, and theories can be tested. The theory that there may be the remains of a great lost civilization lying under the ice in Antarctica is a theory that can be tested. We have the technology and the ability to do it. All that it requires is the political and economic will to go to Antarctica and to use the latest techniques to look under the ice and see what's there. I think we should look. I think the case is compelling enough to justify scientific investment in this research.